I have PTSD. Whenever I hear a sharp, crashing sound, my entire body shakes uncontrollably. But Ethan always claimed he was an artist. He said smashing things was how he found his inspiration. In our 3 years of marriage, the porcelain in our house had been replaced over and over again. Every time glass shattered, I could only cover my ears as hard as I could. I once begged him to work in a soundproof studio, but he only sneered, smashing a vase right at my feet. "If you can't even stand this little noise, why did you marry me in the first place?" I could only curl up in the corner, holding my head, praying to survive the panic attack. Later, when I got pregnant, my anxiety skyrocketed. I begged him to stop smashing things. Instead, he bought me a pair of noise-canceling headphones. "Wear these and you won't hear anything. Stop being so dramatic." I nodded, trying to convince myself he was right, until I was 8 months pregnant and I came home early from my prenatal checkup. The front door was slightly ajar. Ethan was standing barefoot among a sea of shattered glass, holding someone tightly in his arms. The girl was crying softly. She was the college student he sponsored. I stood at the door, watching them for a long time. The girl had accidentally broken a glass and was sobbing in terror. Ethan reached out, gently covering her ears. "Don't be scared, sweetheart. It's just a cup. Out with the old, in with the new. I'll replace everything in this house with plastic cups so you never get startled again." As it turned out, he didn't have an uncontrollable temper. He just didn't think my terror was worth comforting. I looked down at my round, heavy belly. 8 months. To avoid disturbing his artistic creation, I wore those heavy noise-canceling headphones every single day. Even when my ears became inflamed and swollen from the constant pressure, he never showed a shred of sympathy. He would only sneer and smash a vase right at my feet. He said he had to support the family, that he needed inspiration, and told me to stop being so high maintenance. As it turned out, he didn't have an uncontrollable temper. He just didn't think my terror was worth comforting. From the corner of her eye, Lily caught sight of me standing outside. Like a startled little deer, she shrank deeper into Ethan's chest. "Ethan, Chloe is standing outside. Did I disturb her by breaking the cup?" Ethan gently patted her back to soothe her. He glanced carelessly toward the door, his brow furrowing slightly. "There's no one there. The wind probably blew the door open. She isn't even back from her prenatal checkup yet. And even if she were, she's wearing her headphones. She can't hear a thing." I didn't push the door open to confront them. My throat felt like it was stuffed with cotton, rendering me completely mute. I silently turned around and walked away. The baby in my womb seemed to feel my grief, giving me a sharp kick. Clutching my aching lower abdomen, I walked aimlessly down the street. Suddenly, the sky opened up and a torrential downpour began. I didn't have an umbrella. Soaked and miserable, I had no choice but to seek shelter in a corner convenience store. That was when Ethan's call came through. "Where are you?" The moment the call connected, his impatient voice blared through the receiver. "Why aren't you back to cook after your checkup? Lily's stomach is upset today. She wants that homemade linguine you make." I stared at the heavy rain outside, my voice flat. "I'm caught in the rain." A cold snort came from the other end. "Chloe, are you playing hard to get again? It's your own fault for not checking the weather forecast before leaving. Don't expect me to come pick you up. If you're not back in half an hour, don't bother coming back at all." I didn't say another word. I hung up. The rain showed no signs of stopping. I hailed a cab and drove straight to my lawyer's office. "Mrs. Miller, you drafted this divorce agreement and left it with me a long time ago." The lawyer handed me the document, his eyes filled with worry. "Are you sure you want to sign it now? You're heavily pregnant after all." I took the pen and signed my name without a second thought. "I'm sure. I should have signed it long ago. I had just been holding on to a foolish illusion, clinging to the man who once promised to protect me from the world. Now, the dream was over. By the time I got home, the rain had stopped. I was drenched to the bone, my hair clinging to my cheeks like a drowned rat. The rich aroma of food wafted from the kitchen. Ethan was wearing an apron, personally cooking pasta for Lily. He used to do that for me, too. When we first got together, my appetite was terrible. He would drive across the entire city just to buy those pastries I loved. He would whip up different midnight snacks for me late at night. Later, when he became a famous painter, his temper grew with his fame. He said his hands were meant for painting, not for grease and smoke. As it turned out, his warmth hadn't disappeared. It was just no longer meant for me. Hearing the door open, Ethan didn't even bother to turn around. "So, you finally decided to show up. Go clean the dining table." I didn't move. I walked straight toward the bedroom. Lily walked out of the kitchen, carrying 2 bowls of steaming pasta. Seeing me, she waved enthusiastically, as if she were the actual mistress of this house. "Chloe, you're back." She walked up to me, holding the hot pasta. "Ethan made this pasta specifically for me. Do you want to try some?" I stared at her coldly.
Move.
Instead of moving aside, Lily stepped closer, crowding into my space. "Oh," she suddenly gasped. The bowl of scalding pasta tilted and fell straight toward my pregnant belly. The boiling soup was about to splash onto my stomach. Instinctively, I scrambled backward. The bowl crashed onto the hardwood floor, shattering into pieces. The sharp, piercing screech of breaking ceramic exploded in the living room. My pupils dilated. My breathing stopped. My PTSD flared up. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the floor, tightly covering my ears. My entire body began to shake violently. Hearing the commotion, Ethan rushed out of the kitchen like a gust of wind. He didn't even look at me curling on the floor. Instead, his first instinct was to rush over and pull the completely unharmed Lily into his arms. "Lily, did you get burned? Are you okay?" His voice was thick with panic and concern. Lily leaned into his chest, shaking her head tearfully.
"I've fine."
"But Chloe," Ethan snapped his head toward me, his eyes burning with disgust and fury. "Chloe, Lily was nice enough to bring you food, and you pushed her. Do you have any idea how hot the soup is? What if she got scarred? She's just a young girl." I raised my trembling head. My ears were still buzzing loudly, and the man's face before me blurred. This was the man I had loved for 5 years. He was the one who once ran home through a thunderstorm just to hold me close and cover my ears. He had said, "Don't be scared, Chloe. As long as I'm here, I'll never let anything frighten you." Now, for another woman, he was spitting venom at me. I bit my lip and forced myself to stand up against the wall. I dug my nails deep into my palms, using the physical pain to claw back my sanity. I didn't push her. I rasped, my voice raw. She dropped the bowl herself. Hearing this, Lily's tears flowed even faster. "Chloe, how can you say that? I know you don't want me staying here. You think I'm stealing Ethan's attention. But you didn't have to do this just to kick me out." She sobbed, shrinking further behind Ethan's back. Ethan was entirely livid now. He took a step forward and gripped my wrist with crushing force. "Chloe, when did you become so malicious? Lily is only 20. What does she even know? You're about to be a mother. How can your heart be this filthy?" Suddenly, I found it hilarious, and I actually laughed out loud. "Ethan, whose heart is the filthy one here? Do you dare to swear that your feelings for her are strictly charity?" Ethan froze. Guilt flickered in his eyes, which only fueled his explosive rage. "What nonsense are you talking about? You are completely unreasonable." I yanked my hand back with all my might. "Since you think I'm so unreasonable, let's get a divorce." The living room fell into a dead silence. Ethan stunned for a moment, then let out a mocking laugh. "Divorce? Chloe, you can't even support yourself without me. What are you going to survive on? Don't think you can threaten me with divorce just to get your way. I'm not humoring your tantrums anymore." He irritably pulled out a cigarette, then turned to Lily. "Lily, go change your clothes. Some people have ruined the air in here. Let me take you out for French cuisine." Lily nodded obediently. The front door slammed shut. I didn't clean up the mess on the floor. Instead, I walked into the bedroom, packing my clothes and legal documents into a suitcase one by one. I found a cheap, cramped apartment to settle down. Just as I finished unpacking, my best friend, Hazel, sent me a Snapchat video. "Chloe, look at what this green tea bitch Lily posted on her Snapchat." The video showed Ethan's art studio. Lily was playing with an exquisite pocket watch. Suddenly, her hand slipped. The watch hit the floor, its glass face shattering completely. That watch was our token of love. I had spent an entire year learning watch restoration, working until my eyes bled, just to fix it for Ethan. Lily's sweet, giggling voice came through the speaker. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I broke the watch Chloe gave you." Ethan's voice came from off-camera, utterly indifferent. "It's fine. Out with the old, in with the new." I was tired of looking at it anyway. "Throw it away." Then the camera panned. The pocket watch, which held all my love and devotion, was swept ruthlessly into the trash can. Staring at the screen, I felt a sharp pang in my chest. But it didn't hurt much. It was mostly numb. The very last shred of love I had for him evaporated at that moment. To raise money to leave the city, I went to an art gallery I used to collaborate with. I planned to sell a few of my award-winning paintings from before my marriage. Mrs. Miller, I'm so sorry, the gallery owner said, looking incredibly uncomfortable. All your bank accounts and credit cards have been frozen. Even if we sell the paintings, we can't wire the money to your account. I froze. Just then, Ethan's assistant walked out of the gallery. His tone was strictly business. Ma'am, Mr. Miller said, as long as you go back right now, apologize to Miss Evans, and admit your mistake from yesterday, he will unfreeze your cards immediately. Looking at the assistant, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Go back and tell Ethan. Chloe Vance, will never bow down to a homewrecker. The assistant sighed. Ma'am, why must you do this? Mr. Miller said you won't last 3 days. He says you'll come back begging him sooner or later. I ignored him, turning on my heel to leave the gallery. With my accounts frozen, I only had a few $100s in cash. To survive, I stood under the blistering sun with my 8-month pregnant belly, handing out flyers on the street. Sweat soaked my clothes, and my legs felt as heavy as lead. Just as my knees were about to buckle, Lily appeared before me, clinging to Ethan's arm. Ethan was carrying several luxury shopping bags. Seeing my pathetic state, Ethan's brow furrowed into a tight knot. Chloe, how long are you going to keep up this drama? Just to spite me, you're making a fool of yourself on the streets? If you don't care about your dignity, I care about mine, Lily gasped, covering her mouth. Chloe, how can you do this kind of labor? What if you hurt the baby? She pulled a thick stack of $100 bills from her Hermes bag. Take this money for now. If it's not enough, I'll ask Ethan to give you more. She stretched her hand out to hand it to me, but then she intentionally opened her fingers. The green bills scattered all over the dirty pavement. Oh, I'm so sorry, Chloe. My hand slipped. Do you mind picking them up yourself? She giggled behind her hand, her eyes filled with mockery. I didn't bend down. I just stared at her coldly. Lily, you're nothing but a cheap homewrecker. Who gave you the right to flaunt yourself in front of me? Lily's expression instantly changed. She suddenly took a step back and threw herself onto the ground. Chloe, I was just trying to help. Why are you calling me names? Ethan, who had just returned from buying boba, caught the tail end of this. Seething with rage, he rushed over and shoved me hard. Chloe, are you looking for trouble? I was already physically exhausted. With that violent shove, I lost my balance. I crashed heavily onto the concrete. An agonizing, tearing pain erupted from my abdomen. I curled up in excruciating pain, cold sweat instantly drenching my entire body. Ethan didn't even spare me a glance. He was frantically checking on the completely unharmed Lily. Lily, are you hurt? Does it hurt anywhere? Clutching my stomach, I felt a warm, thick rush of liquid flowing down my thighs. Crimson blood stained my dress. Ethan, stop faking it. I barely pushed you. Get up right now and apologize to Lily. Pain. It felt like someone was dragging a rusty saw back and forth inside my abdomen. The agony was so intense, I was on the verge of blacking out, my vision fading to gray. Ethan, save my baby. With the last of my strength, I reached my hand out to the man whose back was turned to me. Chloe, it's a shame you aren't in Hollywood with acting skills like that. Ethan looked back at me, his eyes devoid of any warmth. Using fake blood packets, just to force me to compromise? Let me tell you, if you don't apologize to Lily today, don't even dream of me taking you back. The crowd of onlookers grew larger. Finally, a pedestrian couldn't stand it anymore. Hey, buddy, your wife is actually bleeding. Look at the ground. There are 2 lives at stake here. Call 911. Ethan followed the pedestrian's pointing finger. When his eyes landed on the pooling crimson on the concrete, panic finally flashed across his face. But Lily immediately grabbed his arm, letting out a weak whimper. Ethan, my ankle hurts so bad. I think I sprained it. Ethan's attention was instantly pulled back. He gritted his teeth and scooped Lily into his arms. Chloe, I'll call an ambulance for you. Go to the hospital first and I'll be there soon. With that, he carried Lily away, never once looking back. A kind stranger called 911 for me. My consciousness began to slip away. Memories flashed in my mind like a broken reel. Our first wedding anniversary. To accommodate my illness, he had rented out an entire amusement park. He set off a silent light show of quiet fireworks just for me. He kissed me under the brilliant, silent lights. He had whispered that I was his one and only muse for the rest of his life. The bubble of memory burst. The image of him covering Lily's ears replayed in my head like a sharp dagger twisting in my heart. It brought an unbearable, suffocating pain. At the hospital, the doctors rushed me into the emergency room. Severe hemorrhage. The patient is in critical condition. Prepare for emergency surgery immediately. Get the consent form. The nurse tried to call my emergency contact, Ethan. The number you have dialed is currently switched off. The doctor walked to my bedside with a grave expression. Mrs. Miller, we can't reach your family, but we must operate immediately, or we won't be able to save either you or the baby. Fighting for my very last breath, I grabbed the pen. With trembling fingers, I scribbled my signature on the consent form. Doctor, I choked out, grabbing his sleeve as my tears finally spilled over. If you can't save both, just save me. I want to live. I couldn't die. After a grueling surgery, I was wheeled into the ICU. As the anesthesia wore off, I reached for my phone on the bedside table. The screen lit up with an Instagram notification, a post from Lily. In the photo, Ethan was kneeling, gently applying ice to her ankle. The caption read, *, no matter what, Ethan will always put me first. *. Staring at the photo, my heart went completely cold. I dialed Hazel's number. Hazel, help me get out of the country. Take me away. I never want to see him again. And as I walked away from the shattered glass on the floor, I didn't look back. Not even once. The rest of the evening blurred into a kaleidoscope of flashbulbs, clinking glasses, and murmured adulation in languages I had spent the last 3 years mastering. Echoes of Silence was not just an exhibition, it was a cultural execution. By midnight, every major art critic in Europe had drafted their reviews. They called my work a visceral autopsy of the human soul. They called Vance the vanguard of a new, unapologetic era of contemporary art. They didn't know I was just a mother who had learned to paint with her own ashes. When Hazel and I finally returned to our penthouse suite at the Ritz Paris, kicking off our heels on the plush Persian rug, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was triumphant. Hazel poured 2 fingers of amber cognac into crystal glasses and handed me one. She sank into the velvet armchair opposite mine, her eyes searching my face. "How is your heart?" she asked, her voice dropping its usual fierce armor. I looked down at the liquid catching the dim light of the Parisian street lamps bleeding through the window. "Quiet," I answered truthfully. For 5 years, I thought if I ever saw him again, my chest would cave in. I thought the phantom weight of my baby would crush me all over again. But looking at him tonight, he wasn't a monster anymore, Hazel. He was just a pathetic, incredibly small man. Hazel smiled, a sharp, wolfish grin that reached her eyes. He was hauled off to a precinct in the 1st arrondissement. The gallery owner pressed charges for trespassing and public disturbance. I made sure the paparazzi got high-resolution shots of him being dragged out like a rabid dog. She swirled her glass. Tomorrow, the front pages won't just be about the brilliance of Vance. They'll be about the final, humiliating demise of Ethan Miller. Let them print what they want, I murmured, taking a slow sip. The burn of the cognac grounded me. He doesn't belong in my narrative anymore. The transition back to Florence was seamless, but the atmosphere in the Tuscan villa had subtly shifted. For years, the villa had been my sanctuary, a fortress where I licked my wounds and waged war on a canvas. Now, the iron gates felt less like a barricade against the world and more like an open door, waiting for me to step out. With my debut a monumental success, the art world clamored for more. But I refused to become a machine churning out trauma for their consumption. My studio in the attic transformed. The harsh cadmium reds and pitch blacks, the colors of my suffering, of the bloody pavement and the suffocating darkness, were slowly pushed to the corners of my palette. I began to experiment with light. Cerulean blues. Warm, bleeding golds. The texture of my brushstrokes changed from jagged and violent to sweeping, deliberate, and undeniably powerful. I was no longer painting my death. I was painting my resurrection. 6 months after the Paris exhibition, I was in the middle of a massive canvas, an abstract exploration of dawn breaking over a fractured sea, when Hazel walked in. She was holding a thick, cream-colored envelope. "You have an invitation," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "And a visitor. Though I highly recommend we burn the former and throw boiling water on the latter." I wiped my hands on a rag stained with titanium white. "Who is it?" "The invitation is from Sotheby's in London. They are auctioning off the Miller collection next month to pay off his mounting legal debts and back taxes." Hazel's tone dripped with aristocratic disdain. "And the visitor waiting at the front gate is Lily." I paused, tossing the rag onto the wooden work table. "Lily. Apparently, the 60-year-old real estate mogul threw her out when he found someone 20 years younger. Irony really is a beautiful bitch," Hazel mused. "She's been crying at the intercom for 10 minutes. I can call the carabinieri and have her removed for loitering." "No," I said softly, rolling down the sleeves of my oversized linen shirt. "Let her in. Have Maria serve her tea on the terrace." Hazel raised an eyebrow. "You're playing with her?" "No. I'm just closing a book." When I walked out onto the sun-drenched stone terrace overlooking the rolling Tuscan vineyards, Lily jumped to her feet as if she had been electrocuted. The contrast between us was almost comical. 5 years ago, I had been a pale, hollowed-out ghost wrapped in oversized cardigans, shrinking away from her cruel, vibrant youth. Today, I stood tall in a tailored silk blouse, my posture forged in steel, my eyes clear and untouchable. Lily, on the other hand, looked withered. Her designer dress was a season too old, her blonde hair lacked its usual expensive gloss, and the lines around her mouth were etched with a bitter, exhausting desperation. "Chloe," she breathed, her hands clutching a cheap leather handbag. "It's Vance now," I said calmly, not offering her a seat. I stood by the stone balustrade, letting the Mediterranean breeze brush my face. "Why are you here, Lily?" She swallowed hard, her eyes darting around the expansive, luxurious estate. The sheer wealth of it clearly intimidated her. I saw the news. About Paris. About your art. Congratulations on owning a television. Get to the point." Her face flushed with a mix of shame and residual arrogance. "Ethan ruined my life, Chloe. He tricked me. He told me he was a genius, that he would make me immortal in the art world. But he was a monster. He drank, he broke things, he hit me." She forced a sob, a pathetic, theatrical sound. "We are both victims of the same man. I thought since you are so successful now, you would understand. I want to tell my side of the story. Write a memoir. Surviving the prodigy. But I need a backer. A foreword written by you. If we unite, we could." I let out a soft, genuine laugh. It was a light, musical sound that completely froze her in her tracks. "Victims?" I echoed, stepping closer to her. The scent of her cheap perfume was cloying. "You were not his victim, Lily. You were his accomplice. You didn't cower when he threw plates at my head. You laughed. You didn't cry when he abandoned his pregnant wife to cater to your fake sprained ankle. You smiled at me from his arms." "I was young. I didn't know." "You knew exactly what you were doing," I interrupted, my voice dropping to a silken, lethal whisper. "You were just a parasite who latched onto a dying host, and now that there's no blood left to suck, you want to latch onto me." Lily stumbled back a step, her face draining of color. The mask of solidarity slipped, revealing the terrified, hollow girl underneath. "You have nothing left," she hissed, a brief flash of her old venom surfacing. "You lost your baby. He took that from you. You might have money, but you're barren and alone." I didn't flinch. 5 years ago, those words would have sent me into a hyperventilating spiral. Now, they just bounced off the titanium plating of my soul. "I lost a child," I said, my voice steady, my gaze pinning her to the stone floor. "And I mourned. I bled. I tore myself apart and rebuilt myself from the ground up. But you have never built anything. You are exactly what you were 5 years ago, an empty vessel waiting for a man to give you value. And that is why you will be forgotten." I turned my back to her. "Maria," I called out to the housekeeper. "Escort the guest out. If she returns, release the dogs." As Lily was hastily ushered away, sobbing in genuine humiliation, I felt an incredible lightness in my chest. The ghosts of the past were no longer haunting me. I was haunting them. A month later, the London rain battered the high windows of the Sotheby's auction house. I sat in a private viewing balcony, draped in a sharp, charcoal gray trench coat, a restored vintage Cartier watch ticking quietly on my wrist. Hazel sat beside me, flipping through the glossy auction catalog with a predatory smirk. Down below, the velvet seats were packed with the world's wealthiest collectors. Lot 42 was up. It was Ethan's magnum opus, The Shattered Muse. He had painted it during his peak, back when I was still married to him. It was a massive, chaotic portrait of a woman curled into herself, painted in violent strokes of charcoal and crimson. The art world used to praise it as a masterpiece of emotional depth. I knew the truth. It was a painting of me, trembling on the floor after he had smashed a vase against the wall, covering my ears in a desperate attempt to block out his screaming. He had commodified my terror. He had sold my panic attacks for millions. And tonight I was taking it back. "Current bid is at £1.2 million, the auctioneer called out smoothly. I picked up the small electronic paddle on the table. 1.5, I signaled. The auctioneer caught it. 1.5 million to the anonymous bidder in the balcony. Down in the back of the room, standing near the velvet ropes like a ghost denied entry to heaven, was Ethan. He had aged another 10 years since Paris. He was wearing a suit that was visibly too large, his hair greased back, his eyes sunken and desperate. He was watching the auction of his own soul, hoping it would fetch enough to keep him out of debtor's prison. 2 million, a Russian oligarch in the front row signaled. I pressed the button again. 3. A murmur rippled through the crowd. £3 million for a painting by a disgraced, cancelled artist was absurd. Ethan's head whipped toward the balcony. Even through the dim lighting, I saw the exact moment he recognized the silhouette of my face. His jaw went slack. He clutched the velvet rope, his knuckles white, his eyes burning with a chaotic mix of awe, horror, and manic hope. He thought I was buying it because I still loved his work. He thought this was a rescue. Going once, going twice. The auctioneer struck the gavel. Sold. For £3 million. Hazel leaned over to me. 3 million? Really, Chloe? We could have bought a small island. It's not about the money, Hazel, I said softly, standing up and buttoning my coat. It's about the funeral. 10 minutes later, I stood in the private holding room beneath the auction floor. The shattered muse rested on an easel in the center of the room. The gallery attendants had left me alone with it. The door creaked open. Chloe. Ethan stood in the doorway. He had somehow bribed or begged his way past the security guards. He was panting, his eyes wet with tears, staring at me as if I were a deity who had descended to offer him salvation. You bought it, he choked out, taking a hesitant step into the room. He reached out as if to touch my coat, but pulled back, afraid I would vanish. You bought my painting. I knew when you saw it again. You would remember. We were magic together, Chloe. My genius, your quiet grace. We can start over. I'm clean now. I swear to God, I haven't touched a drop in weeks. With your money and my talent. Shut up, Ethan, I said. My voice wasn't raised. It was a flat, cold command that instantly silenced his babbling. I walked past him and picked up a heavy, steel-handled box cutter from the gallery technician's supply cart in the corner. Ethan's brow furrowed. Chloe, what are you doing? I walked up to the canvas. The painting that represented the darkest, most agonizing years of my life. The canvas he had bought with my tears and my terror. Without a word, I drove the tip of the steel blade into the top left corner of the canvas. No. Ethan shrieked. I dragged the blade diagonally across the fabric with a loud, violent RIP. The sound of tearing canvas echoed in the quiet room like a gunshot. The painted face of my terror split in two. Stop. What are you doing? That's a masterpiece. Ethan screamed, lunging forward. Before he could reach me, Hazel's private security detail, who had been waiting in the shadows outside the door, stepped in and grabbed him by his arms. He thrashed wildly, screaming, crying, as he watched me dismantle his legacy. I pulled the blade out and drove it in again. And again. I carved the canvas into ribbons. I slashed through the charcoal. I shredded the crimson. I reduced a £3 million painting to hanging strips of worthless, painted cloth. When I was finished, I tossed the box cutter onto the floor. It clattered sharply. Ethan sobbed at the sound, collapsing to his knees, held up only by the guards. Why? He wept, burying his face in his hands. Why would you do that? You just threw away £3 million. I walked over to him. I crouched down so we were eye to eye. To me, £3 million is pocket change, Ethan. I whispered softly. But to you, it was your last hope. I didn't buy this painting to save you. I bought it because I own my trauma now. You don't get to profit from my pain anymore. No one does. I stood up, smoothing the front of my trench coat. You always told me I lacked the fiery agony required to be a true artist, I said, looking down at his pathetic, shivering form. You were wrong. I had the agony. You gave it to me. But the fire? The fire is all mine. And it's going to burn you out of history. I looked at the guards. Let him go. He's not a threat. He's just garbage. As I walked out of the Sotheby's holding room, leaving Ethan sobbing amidst the ribbons of his destroyed masterpiece, the storm outside seemed to break. The heavy London clouds parted, letting a single, piercing ray of sunlight hit the wet pavement. 2 years later, Venice, Italy. The Biennale was in full swing. The floating city was alive with the pulse of the international art community. I stood in the center of the arsenal, surrounded by my latest collection. There was no blood here. No jagged porcelain. The exhibition was titled Kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. But instead of ceramics, I had painted massive, hyperrealistic portraits of women who had survived unimaginable trauma. Scars, both physical and emotional, were painted over in brilliant, luminous gold leaf. The paintings radiated power, warmth, and an unbreakable resilience. I was standing before the centerpiece, a self-portrait. But it wasn't my face. It was an abstract representation of a womb, cracked open, but blooming with a vibrant, impossible garden of golden lotuses. It's breathtaking. I turned. Standing beside me was Julian, a renowned art restorer from Milan. He was quiet, brilliant, and possessed an innate, respectful gentleness that I had slowly learned to appreciate over the last year of our collaboration. He didn't try to dominate my space. He just stood beside me, admiring the light. It took me a long time to find the right shade of gold. I smiled, holding my champagne flute. "You found it," Julian said softly, his dark eyes meeting mine. "It looks like a sunrise." Across the room, Hazel was holding court with a group of Italian critics, laughing loudly, looking like a queen who had conquered the continent. Catching my eye, she raised her glass to me from afar. I raised mine back. I had heard through the grapevine what happened to Ethan. After the incident in London, he had completely unraveled. He was arrested a few months later for trying to forge my early work in a desperate attempt to pay off his debts. The irony was poetic. The man who once called my art cute and soulless was now sitting in a medium-security prison in New York, convicted of fraud for trying to perfectly replicate my soul. He was a footnote. A ghost. I, however, was vividly, radiantly alive. I turned back to the golden canvas, taking a deep, unhindered breath. The air in Venice smelled of salt, old stone, and infinite possibility. The phantom weight that had once crushed my chest was gone, replaced by a fierce, soaring freedom. I had been shattered into 1,000 pieces on a cold hospital floor. But as I looked at the gold binding the cracks of my life together, I realized something beautiful. I was so much stronger at the broken places.